Hi, it's Samira. I'm a big fan of art and extended reality. While searching for information about XR art in Canada and worldwide, I found a lack of behind the scenes insights. So I created this newsletter to share what I learned about artists, their projects, and funding. Want to join this community? Subscribe to get XR Studio stories in your inbox. In this episode, I had the pleasure of sitting down with Robin, co-founder of the Museum of Other Realities, or more. We dive into the fascinating journey of how the museum came to be, starting from a shared interest in virtual reality. Robin shared how a coffee chat turned into a vision for a platform that not only showcases unique art, but also fosters social interaction in virtual spaces. We discussed the challenges they faced while launching the project and what makes more stand out, especially its focus on innovative 2D art experiences that go beyond traditional exhibitions. Let's dive in. Hi, Robin. Thanks for coming to this interview. And let's talk about the idea of the project. How did you start thinking about this project and help you?
Totally. Thanks for having me. So we started the museum in, I believe, maybe even late 2016, very early 2017. I met my co-founder playing another VR game, and we realized that we both lived in the same city. So we met for coffee and discussed the idea of a sort of a quarterly magazine, which would have a collection of experiences in it. And you could just pay, a couple of bucks a couple times a year to get and try these experiences. And it would give those experiences a bit of distribution as well. So we started putting this idea together. It was originally called There. And one thing we kind of chose to do at the last minute on a whim was to include multiplayer in the space. And so then we actually distributed a Dropbox, just a zip file to everybody who was invited. And then they would, unzip it and run the executable. And what we found was that people enjoyed the social aspect as much as they seemed to enjoy the experiences. We had essentially four doors. You'd walk through the doors and that would trigger the experience. These people would stand outside the door. So we ended up just hanging out kind of in a lobby area around a few little pieces of what you might call early VR art that we had put into the lobby to kind of fill it up a little bit. And we pretty quickly realized that this was a larger attraction than what we had originally intended to show. So we started building the museum space just around that idea of artwork in a space that was social, and essentially proceeded to have a series of underground shows. After a little while, we started to attract some interest from investors, and we ended up raising our Series A in 2019, put together a small team and started building out the gallery space in earnest. That's when it really got a lot bigger and we distributed it to the public. We ended up showing more than 40 artists and I think a number of pieces more than that. And then it just kind of went from there.
Okay. So why did you choose this name for your project? As like how you pronounce it exactly, like MOR or more?
The Museum of Other Realities. So it's an acronym, but more is what people started calling it. And we just thought it worked. It's easy to say, and it's kind of mysterious, so it makes you want to go and see, is there more? What's there?
It was like 3 years from starting the project, the idea to kind of launching it, right? And how did you get the attention from people, like first visitor people? Yeah, use a Dropbox or something like that. So
Well, it was a very small community and we knew a lot of the people in it and just sort of allowed the idea to spread by word of mouth and more people were interested in coming. So the parties kept getting bigger. We ended up sharding them eventually. So we would have rooms of 20 or 30 people, several rooms. It was fantastic, honestly, to a decent portion of the community of early adopters and artists that was there at the time in the space and to be able to show a lot of that art.
What is, in my opinion, is very unique about your project is the shows at the exhibitions usually are not something that you can see in the physical space. Like So we have like other art galleries in VR. I experienced some of them for my paper, as I said before. But Few has this feature that is like truly digital art, as I say. It's not like a 2D art. So we have like 2D digital art in other galleries, but like a 3D one, something that we can use the feature of the VR. I think it's very unique about this project. How did you come up with this idea? Like, why you want to like have something like a 3D art there, but not just copying something that is already available in the museum, right?
Well, we had tried a lot of really interesting early experiences that would be hard to communicate any other way. I remember there was one where you just peeled Jello off a Buddha. And that was the whole thing. You're just peeling this Jello off the Buddha. There was nothing else to it, but it would have been really hard to do in the real world. And we saw VR as this way of experiencing things that you couldn't experience in any other medium, and a way of experiencing that with other people who are, far away, maybe across the ocean from you. I worked with a lot of people I never physically met, but to have them in the same space. And I've always thought that essentially at the core of our practice, or my practice, is this idea of finding new ways to interact with information, media, and new ways to interact with one another over that media. And so the museum ended up being a new way to interact with information or media, and to interact with others across that media to bring people together. And we always looked for work that had been made in or for VR, just because it seemed like there was an incredible opportunity to show this work that wasn't being shown anywhere else or didn't have a forum, and to just show it for its own sake and allow it to breathe and give it space. And that's it. You're just there. You're in the thing, maybe somebody's with you. And I think that was, pretty much, people asked a few times if we'd like to submit the gallery for awards to like film festivals and stuff. And I always said, the gallery is empty. It's the things in the gallery that make it a museum, that media and that content and those experiences. If you want to put one of those in there, and I think a number of them did actually go in various festivals over the years, but that's all it was. It was a wrapper for this incredible community and this incredible ecosystem that was at the time so vibrant.
Okay. So is that the reason that you don't have the desktop mode for your project?
Yeah, we experimented with desktop mode a few times, and I think that there's a lot of people who are doing it better natively. There's a lot of other art museums that are designed for desktops. And I think something that happens is a lot of the media that we're showing is made for VR. It's made to be experienced in VR. When you show that on desktop, something's lost. It's a lot of the time hard to put your finger on what that is. We had a desktop mode and even a phone app, but they were more utilitarian than anything. And I would say if you want to do a museum on another device, you have to look at that device as integral to the museum experience, to what you're curating, and to how you're showing it. And to us, those two things never quite connected.
What do you think is XR arts? Like something should be in 3D, or like everything that is immersive with XR art?
I think art is anything you can get away with. So anything that you can put someone in front of and they get a reaction from is art. And some people are better at doing that over and over again than others. And some things that maybe aren't even intended to be art originally end up being pretty artistic. We had a lot of interesting glitch. We had, for example, we had an artist, Kabibo. He made this sort of sea creature that worked its way through the gallery slowly, and there was a bug where it would appear in every dimension. So we would have these portals. You could go to other dimensions of their art pieces, and you could go through one of these portals, you could clip through the wall, and you were just stuck on the outside of this mesh. It looked like a coral reef almost, and the backdrop was just this deep blue. So you're standing outside of this art piece, deep blue backdrop, and that sea creature that appears in every dimension is just working its way across the space. Honestly, it was pretty stunning. I think that there's lots of things like that. I think that it's pretty hard to have a hard and fast rule what is VR art or XR art. I think that if you get in it and it gets a response from the viewer, then that's immersive art, and there's lots of different ways to do it. Some immersive art is a pure soundscape, and I think some people are doing incredible work in that respect.
Mm-hmm.
But it can be a lot of different stuff. As a much of a non-answer as that may be to your question.
No, okay, interesting. Let's talk about the fonts. I think that's a more interesting topic for so many people that may watch this interview later. How did you find your project? Because I saw that right now it's like free and there's nothing there that you can like pay for it. How do you fund the project?
So we actually originally charged for the museum, but we never made a lot of sales. There's something interesting about how people are quite reluctant to buy a piece of digital content, and they talk about this a lot, particularly in VR. We won't even pay the price of a couple of beers for a digital experience. So I think it's a little frustrating, and it kind of restricts the ecosystem, and that a lot of these indie creators have to find other ways to monetize their work and make a living, right? But what we ended up doing was just doing a series of festivals, film festivals, awards, essentially gatherings in VR, and we would rent the More as a venue or license it for a certain period of time. And we did this for several years, starting essentially right at the beginning of COVID, because there was a need for alternative venues. And also, it was, I think, a really good time for VR art. There was a lot of creation happening. And I mean, that may be due in no small part to the fact that people were stuck in their houses, but it had been happening before that. The scene was really vibrant. And so we ended up essentially providing venue service to huge number of different organizations over several years, and that's how we made money.
Okay. So is there any like major collaboration with any company or like museum make a big impact on your project?
Yeah, I mean, there was a bunch. Our original investors were HTC. They make a lot of the headsets. They made the Vive, and so we partnered with them and have worked with them for many years. There's also a number of big festivals that came our way, and we ended up working with for several years. Cannes is one of them. Tribeca is a great partner. We did several years of film festivals with them. It was always enjoyable. But yeah, there was a lot of great collaborations that we did in that period. I don't know if I could name just one, but it was a really great opportunity to work with a lot of the artists we'd already worked with, in a lot of cases, to provide elements of these venues, and that allowed us to do things that other solutions just couldn't offer in the same level of fidelity at the time. And I think it really allowed us to stand out in a way that made for very interesting and engaging work.
What do you think there are like two main challenges that you had in this project?
I would say one of them would probably be just technical, broadly speaking. It's quite a technical challenge to connect a number of people reasonably reliably over relatively new forms of media and with relatively new tools. We had a lot of different systems that we were trying to display on, and we were also showing data that was pretty new and using multiplayer technologies that were relatively new. So this made for a constant tug of war between what we wanted to do and what we could do. So that was a major one. And then I would say the other challenge would just be generally finding a way as a creative space to make money without selling your soul, to do these partnerships that foster the original spirit of what you're trying to do. And that can be really difficult, I think, because we don't value art as much as we should, even though in retrospect, I like to think of art as cultural production. We're building culture whenever we create so much as a meme. You might say that it's building and changing culture incrementally. So these artworks and the art world is important, but it can often be hard to make that case to investors or the people who are paying for the experience. It's one of those situations where I think we are a lot more perceptive, but a lot less reflective than we think we are, in that we notice a lot, and a lot of the things that we take in, they change the way that we see the world and experience the world, but we aren't always the best at itemizing those things at the end of the day and saying, okay, well, what really changed the way that I feel about X, Y, or Z, or the entire world today, or this week, or over the course of my life?
So what do you think there are like solutions? I think because these challenges are something in general XR art industry may struggle with. Um, do you have any solution in your mind that, okay, if that happens, you might solve this issue or something like that?
Well, that touches on a much larger issue, I think, and that is the issue of this sort of ecosystem that undergirds creative work in a medium. And one thing that I've noticed over the last couple of years is that that ecosystem has faded away to some degree. In the early days and the, middle of the more, there was a lot of work being created, a lot of work being shown, a lot of interesting ways for creators to not only produce these pieces, but to think about them and think about them in relation to other people's work and the things that were happening at the time. And I think that something that's changed recently, and it might just be the sort of leap from tethered headsets to all-in-one headsets, but there's just not as much creation and experimentation going on. It might be that the communities are shifting. Obviously, early adopters of tethered VR headsets are going to be very high tech and very experimental. So it tends towards these sort of creative populations. But I find that on a lot of the all-in-one headsets, there aren't as many apps that are explicitly intended to be used for creation, or they have guardrails around them. And there aren't as many forums to express those creations. I mean, I think that VRChat is and has been doing a really great job of being a really wonderful kind of space to do a lot of weird, different stuff. But I can't think of anything, recent that has really changed people's perception of what's possible in the space in the way that a lot of the early experimentation did. And that might be my fault. If anybody's out there doing stuff that's totally mind-bending, please get in touch with me. I'd love to see it and experience it. But I think that more than anything, that's the biggest hurdle. You need an ecosystem, but an ecosystem needs nutrients in order to thrive, and it needs the sun. And I feel like for some reason, something has changed about the way that ecosystem is out of balance a little bit, and there's not as much, even if you had an art museum today, I'm not sure if it would be as easy to curate it as it had been for us with the More in its early days, even though the community was much smaller. I think I don't know, maybe it's harder to push the bounds on a very large envelope than on a very small one. And it could just be a function of the square cube law. As the volume of what we can do gets bigger, it gets harder to do things that are, really hit you right there and make you think. But yeah, so I see that as a big, probably the biggest stumbling block is that ecosystem question, and a bit of a chicken and an egg situation around creativity. Like, I know those spaces resound with almost everyone. Lots of people would tell us that the museum had an appeal, sort of 8 to 80. Anybody could get in there and have a good time. I know that they hit, and that sort of work really hits people, but it's just been a struggle, I think, for those spaces to grow, both in terms of, the creations going in them and the spaces themselves.
So what's your plan for the future of More?
Well, at the moment, things are pretty quiet. We've kind of been looking around and seeing what's happening in the world. I think that there's some really interesting opportunities around a lot of what's happening with language models and creativity. It's become a lot easier to code creatively over the last even just 6 to 12 months, I think, to the point where almost anybody can, for example, make a game in, React. And I wonder how much of that might trickle down to the sort of all-in-one headset. So I'm keeping my ear to the ground with regards to that. I think it could be quite interesting if we find some way to connect those two affordances. But otherwise, taking a step back, and I'm kind of looking at different types of information that interest me and different ways of expressing that information to the user. I've been looking at just using a web browser and looking at essentially new types of data and how we might be not only expressive but informative to users about, things as simple as traffic in their city, or we've been looking at market data. It's quite interesting. Yeah, so kind of going in that direction, just poking around, seeing what's happening.
Okay. Is it like possibility to add AI features to the More in the future?
Well, it's an interesting question. I think more than anything, in my eyes right now, what the AI enables is is to create content really quickly and effectively and really democratically in a way that, it used to be that you'd have to be quite a good programmer to put together a reasonably stable web app. But I think that's gotten a lot easier. And so that's going to trickle down from those frameworks to potential creators and hopefully into creations and sort of kickstart that ecosystem question I was talking about.
And how can artists and creators participate in your VR gallery?
You can email us anytime or hop on our Discord.
Wow, that's great. Anything that you want to mention before the end of the interview?
No, I don't think so. Thanks for listening, everyone, and thank you for having me. It's been wonderful.
Thank you.